So, how's it going, guys? I'm Jon Hood. Most of you guys probably know me. A couple faces I'm not as familiar with, but we'll get there. Let's see, I'm starting Capstone in the fall, and that will also make my third full year as a member of FSAE. I've done 2 years ago, well, not 2 seasons ago, so last year, on the Aero team. Aero team lead at the beginning of this year, and we worked something out with the College of Technology. So they took care of that, and I was able to focus on my work a lot more as a manufacturing chair. So been around, I've seen a lot of the components that go into the car, and bringing me to the tech director position. I like to look back and see kind of what the people in my position have done before and how that's set up, where I intend to go in the future. And so we look at Jeremiah from 2 years ago, who was a fantastic fit for the job. He had a massive amount of technical knowledge, a ton of drive, and there are a lot of things that I respect about the way that he did his job. And I might not have the technical knowledge that he had, but I do have a lot of familiarity with the components of the car, and that's something that I'm fully intending on expanding on. And then we look at this year, and we have Andrew, who also doesn't have the technical knowledge that Jeremiah had, but he has a lot of vision and a lot of drive as well. He's laid out a lot of excellent ideas that I think in some cases may have been a bit overambitious, but broken down into bite-sized chunks are totally manageable. One of which being the rotation program, or this retention and training, breaking that down into a more focused group where we can pass some technical knowledge on to, say, maybe starting with juniors and moving on to develop at least a second layer of people to come in behind us and sustain what we have. And from a technical side, borrowing a little bit more from Jeremiah, having a much more structured and be much more emphatic about scheduling and manufacturing techniques, and just keeping the ball rolling. And when time comes to make a decision, you pull the trigger, for better or worse. Things break, and we've come back from some what seemed like very dicey situations before. The big thing is we make our decisions, we move forward, we stay on track, and build ourselves a badass race car. So yeah. How much time do I have left?
About 20 seconds.
All right, well.
Are you in Capstone next year?
Yeah. Well, I started with that because I didn't know.
I was just making sure.
Are you trying to make Aero a fall, spring?
Questions are for later.
Okay, sorry.
All
Alright.
I already heard you spiel. Yes.
No, you don't have to hear this spiel. It's not. It's about.
Oh, you have a new one?
No, it's about technical.
Alright, and let's go.
Yeah.
No.
What is your time commitment?
I'm really glad you asked. I'm actually looking forward to that. The past 2 years, I've spent time with FSAE above and beyond my class schedule, and the best part about starting Capstone is that that'll be incorporated into what I'm already doing, so no issues there. Yes.
All right. So this year you've worked on College of Technology inclusion in Capstone.
Yes.
Right? What is your future plans for that, if any? Because we've had a lot of problems with the bullshit that they've been putting us around. I mean,
Yes. I got you. Let me go. Yeah. I would very much like to cultivate that kind of relationship. It brings in manpower and experience and different ideas into the team that we can't necessarily get from the College of Engineering, just because the graduating class size, we're already taking about 20% of it. 25. It's a lot. Big lessons learned, especially on my part this year, because that was in large part facilitated by me, on how that's going to be approached. There needs to be a better framework on how they're held accountable. Sean has been amazing. Everybody else disappeared, and to be fair, he's been having the same difficulties with them within their own senior design group. So it's going to be difficult to determine how much is something that we did, how much is something that he's doing, and how much is just them. And I know Kiko kind of has a history of that from last year. He was Aero.
We don't need to go.
So yeah. Anyway, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Yes, ma'am.
what is your vision for next year? Like, what are your goals? What do you, how
is
are
there
you
a way that
gonna
you can make that
build
more
and
specific?
finish?
Well,
What are
I'm-
your 3 major goals? And how do
As
you
a guy now, how
First
do
of
you
all-
improve on
in
this?
summary?
Yeah. First of all, my first big thing is to have a much more focused approach to design. We have 3 years of data to run off of now. We know in large part what works and what doesn't work. I don't see any reason, and we've had a conversation like this before, we don't need to redesign the whole chassis. We can start the year with the engine mounts large, the bulk of the dimensions already set, perhaps even the suspension points, and look on how we're going to improve stuff like the strength-weight ratio. We can do similar things when it comes to MMI and suspension, focusing on really, in all honesty, approaching it like engineers. We don't have to have this big novel thing, we just have to we have a thing, we can make it better. In what way? Let's focus on that, get it done. And it's kind of that incremental step speech that I gave at one of the general meetings. That's one of them. Can we perhaps do 2 more later, maybe? I mean, I can keep going, but there's all kinds of Andrew.
Okay, so whether it's sickness or dropout or they gave up on the team or whatever, but there's always these random parts that just don't have anybody attending to them anymore. How would you work to make sure this car was still done, assuming a capstone member was just gone now?
Okay, first thing I would do is I would look within the sub-team that part is and try to delegate with that within there. And if needed, try to find some underclassmen help to try to shuffle around some already existing resources. Then there's the possibility, if it's one of those parts that's kind of on the edge between 2 teams, maybe the neighboring team can take it over as a last resort. I really don't want to have to do this. I don't think anybody does, but I like designing and building stuff. I'll do it if I have to. But really, as tech director and as anybody else really, or a team lead like that, it would be the last resort. I would try everything I can to get it done with the resources that were already in place before I had to step in myself. But I would, because not going to Lincoln's not an option. So, 1 second.
Yeah.
I don't remember the order. There's so many.
All right, so what process would you take to improve an already existing template?
Okay, yeah, you give me an example, because there's
The chassis.
answers. The chassis.
Assuming we're improving from an already existing chassis, what process do you take to improve an existing chassis?
So you were to look at, first of all, what the biggest drawback to that design is. We've done big improvements on the weight from last year, but we could focus on something. Maybe there's some weird geometry that maybe we can focus right here and get the same strength results out of where it looks like there's 2 halves of the chassis that are kind of right behind the suspension points and the front roll hoop. And there's just like a bunch of stuff there. Maybe we can make that little spot lighter.
3/4 chassis.
We
Just
could
throwing that out there.
once we get to the point where we're really struggling to move past that, then without scrapping this design, we can start a second look into 3/4 length or a monocoque or something like that. But we still have this, and we won't make that switch until we're ready. At least if I have anything.
Yeah, I got to follow up on that.
Yeah.
Whoa, good follow.
You of all people.
At what point do you believe the design can no longer be optimized?
That is,
What's the limit?
okay, realistically, I don't think that really exists. Practically, it's when there's budget, there's time. There's got to be a time where you pull the trigger and say, we've done enough, we need to move on. Aside from that, it's like you get diminishing returns, and once you start seeing, it's like, hey, well, we're really doing a lot of work for not much more. Maybe we can start looking at that 3/4 length chassis now and seeing if that will bump us up to the next notch, then we can start making real progress again. So it's kind of, there's not a definitive point, but there are indicators that you can look for.
No, you stuck with me.
Well, Chris has had his getting blue.
Oh, good, Chris.
Yeah, all right.
How are you going to make sure we stay on a schedule?
Staying on schedule is one of the biggest challenges that we've always had. And I think it kind of stems back to all of these very small delays, very small excuses that happen. It's like, oh, well, a day here, a day there. And that started back in October, November. And now those little days and half days have added up, and now we're looking at a couple weeks that we're like, oh shit, we've got 4 left, and our goal was the 22nd. That's a separate conversation. To keep on track, I think there has to be a lot more decision making when something, for lack of a better term, excuse the French, you got to know when to shit or get off the pot. So, I really, that's the only thing I can think of.
So my question kind of ties into that.
I know that didn't quite address it, but one of the things that you can do to stay on schedule is you just got to make a decision and move on with that. And if it breaks later, that's an emergency, but it's better than all these delays that you're building into the process. Yes, ma'am.
So on that subject, how would you keep the power team on schedule? Because it's always first year, second year, third year.
This is good. This is good. It ties into something I said earlier. You guys are asking hard questions, so I'm going to give you the hard answers. There is. If
Guys.
Yeah. There were a lot of loops that we went through and arrived right back where we were. All that time that we spent, all the time and resources we spent trying to figure out what engine we were going to use just to arrive right back at where we were. Sometimes that's necessary, but I feel like if you do that too many times within a team, then things really get delayed. Other specific examples is like, yeah, we keep putting this off until we can find the machining for it, but we have a viable solution that we could do now by the end of the week and take that, finish it, package it, and move those resources to another part of the project. And again, going back to like all the little things that build up, all the little decisions, all the little doubts that keep delaying things add up real fast. And fighting those from the beginning is very important. Oh, sorry.
All right. So, two things. One, the first part of last semester, Andrew was very kind of allowing for the designs to develop and all that, and it was great, right? I think that the authoritative position that he has now should have taken over about maybe 1 month ago, and we would have been in a better spot. First question, do you plan on implementing that right away, or like he did, which like I said, I thought was good, allowing the designs to develop and then calling a spot, saying, listen, as manufacturing check, sometimes the designs are not optimal. Secondly, you can't use that engine next year.
I know.
What the fuck do you plan on doing with that? That thing is going to be
Trust me, we've been talking about it. We have ideas. I'll address that at the integrations meeting.
$3,000 worth of new.
Yeah, but ideas are fine before we're done with this
Oh,
conference.
of course. Yeah, of course.
So the original part goes back to what I was saying during the speech when I only had 4 minutes, and I was saying there are things that I learned from Jeremiah and things that I learned from Andrew. And Jeremiah was very knowledgeable, very authoritative. No, this is the way we're going to do. You're going to do it. If you're not going to do it, I'm going to do it. Get out. And Andrew, like I said, he has a lot of great ideas. He does cultivate that creativity and stuff. But I really think, and it's not always the right answer, but I think in this case it is, that a middle ground between those two approaches is really beneficial. And as it progresses through the year, leaning a little bit more towards Jeremiah's style of doing things, which is where I like to be in my personality anyway.
My advice is to take the knowledge that Andrew has right now, because he is an absolute, I spent all of spring break with him. He's an absolute wealth of knowledge, and it's actually, I mean, he needs to be graduating with us right now. I don't give a fuck. He needs to be graduating with us right now. He is he's one of our engineers that are, top-notch engineers. So I need to know that you are willing to rely on his knowledge and say, listen, fall on his shoulder when it comes time to that, because he is, like I said, an absolute wealth of knowledge. I spent all spring break with him and it was awesome. So
yeah, and depending on how many write-ins you guys put for the tech director position, I plan on starting with him on that tomorrow.
Yeah, listen, we're not talking. It's not about competition. It's about work collaboration.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. We'd be there.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so working with Jeremiah, as soon as graduation hits, everybody kind of dropped off, and I guess I haven't really thought of the question itself, but I guess how do you ensure that, you know, only 5 people will be in the shop for the next 2 months after graduation, only sleeping 2 hours a day, because it's freaking brutal. And you can't do anything about it. Like, where are you gonna look for resources for people to actually be committed enough to, like, make that their life?
The unfortunate thing is there's nothing that you can directly do about that. People are people, and, you know, to be fair, I mean, the capstone guys will probably say this, like, it's a very big decision to make that decision to stay after graduation and finish what you started and stuff like that. You know, some people have jobs, other priorities. I think one of the best ways to combat that is to start early and develop a culture where that idea creeps up a lot less.
Interview process.
The interview process is a good screening point, but also I think this year especially, even though it doesn't seem to reflect in the number of underclassmen that we have, at least among the people that are capstone that have been around, like we're a family. Like we see each other, I mean, the time, and in Lincoln is going to be a totally different story. But the question would be, and I don't have an answer right now, but the question would be, how do we develop that without
Getting to that.
without being in the same set of hotel rooms for 4 days, and then coming back and stinking and, like, you know, going through that process with each other where it's like, oh, everything's cool now, or yeah, you know. So how do you
I
develop
think
that
that
over time?
involves working with your other officers. Your sustainability, your director of communications, your treasurer, all of that, working together on that.
How do I-
I'm putting.
I'm just saying,
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'm putting confidence in you to keep that struggle. Like, I don't remember because it's foggy days, right? But like, people were sleeping on the welding table
Yeah.
to get the car done.
Yeah.
Like,
And I would like to avoid
I
that.
have faith in you to like keep that struggle alive, like from the beginning. Because after this year, there will be no more people that were there since the first year, and
Yes.
like that experience alone is like. Oh,
this is the do or die year.
Yeah, and it's a very, very crucial time for that, and I've had a lot of very meaningful conversations with the current officers and potential future officers about the implications of that. And I think that we have we're on the same ground as far as that's concerned. We have a lot of good ideas on how we can keep things going, mainly from borrowing from the people that came before.
This is it.
All right, let's take the last question before we cover that.
Okay, so next year we'll probably switch engines, right? We'll probably use a 4-cylinder one, heavier. So then
Maybe not necessarily bigger or heavier, but very, 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 very likely not KTM.
not KTM.
But
Okay.
single cylinder?
Well,
Yes.
it's flexious.
Discussion
What?
for the day, guys.
Yeah.
Who's the day?
So, increased performance, hierarchy and torque and horsepower means that we could probably use bigger tires now. It would make more sense because we can get more forces out of them.
Okay.
We have more power, right? But that also implies changing the suspension points. So, if we want to take it to the next level, then suspension needs to know what kind of engine we're going to use
And
to get our points, and then test them on optimal kinematics and dynamics.
yes.
And can we get all of that done in August, or should we start in July, like we did this year, last semester?
Right. That's kind of one of the things that, again, goes back to the speech I made during the general meeting that not everybody here was there for. But I very much believe in incremental steps. One foot in front of the other. And you're right, all of those systems are tied together.
Yeah.
And it's really important to make sure that we're all on the same page as a team, top to bottom, on what exactly it is our goal. Points to me, they're important, they're fun, they're nice. They're not the most important thing now. I think for me, points become important once we show consistency. But other than that, Eddie was a better car than Gladys. Gladys got more points than Eddie. Why? A wire melted. Right? So we need to get ourselves to a point first that we can develop a consistent product, that we can take meaningful data to see what changes are actually getting points, what's a fluke, and all of that. So I want to go faster and get lighter and have a better looking car just as much as anybody else. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we're doing that in a smart way that we can build from. And I guess to answer your question, that series of changes is going to have to come from a conversation that everybody's on par with.
Between those two teams.
Incrementally, yeah. So.
And just follow up on that, like, last year, so we started designing in July, creating type models that to the watt, right? We knew we were gonna most likely keep the same engine, so we input that data into optimal dynamics, like horsepower and torque from the OEM specs, right? And then we started testing the geometry in optimal dynamics. So if we're changing the engine, so new specs are gonna be pertaining to that engine, right?
Right.
So then suspension needs to know that like right away before they start designing. Unless they keep maybe an engine about the same size, same weight, same power, and just use the same suspension force.
If we don't make a drastic change in the engine, then there shouldn't be very much in the way of drastic changes for suspension. So yes, there will be changes,